in U.S. airspace Friday. The object was detected near Alaska Thursday. Officials describe it as being roughly the size of a small car. This comes just days after the U.S. shot down a Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina with a payload of cameras and antennas the size of 3 school buses. Wei Zhang is at the White House with more.
On the orders of President Biden, the F-22 fighter jet shot down the unidentified object at 1:45 this afternoon.
Success.
The White House says the U.S. first detected the unmanned object last night, flying at 40,000 feet above the northern coast of Alaska and floating northeast, well within the range of commercial planes.
And posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. And it came inside our territorial waters. Those waters right now are frozen, but inside territorial airspace and over territorial waters.
Pentagon officials said the latest object was shot down so quickly because it was over frozen water, making it easier to recover, and because its size would create less of a debris field.
It was much, much smaller than the spy balloon that we took down last Saturday, roughly the size of a small car, as opposed to a payload that was like 2 or 3 buses size, right?
Several military aircraft are now involved in the recovery effort off the coast of Alaska. The object reached U.S. airspace less than a week after the military shot down a Chinese spy balloon, which also entered over Alaska before making its way over several states in 7 days, prompting bipartisan backlash over how long it took.
It's good news that they're on alert now. It still begs the question why they weren't on alert last week when the spy balloon flew into our airspace.
Today, the U.S. announced it added Chinese firms connected to Beijing's surveillance balloon program to an export blacklist, so they won't have access to technology or goods from the U.S. The White House says it has not reached out to China about that latest object that was shot down. Catherine?
Wei Zhang, thank you. Earlier, we spoke with former Defense Secretary Mark Esper. Just for some context, are there sensitive U.S. government installations in this region that might be of interest to an adversary like China?
Oh, well, sure. I don't know the exact locations. And what's different about this object that entered the airspace today is it came in from the north, as compared to the Chinese spy balloon that came in from the southwest along the Aleutians last week. But in Alaska, we have, our anti-ballistic missile interceptor site. We have Army bases. We have Air Force bases. We have a lot of military personnel up there. So, yes, there are things to see and learn about if it is indeed a surveillance balloon. I think we need to, withhold judgment here. There's some things here that we should wait and see and learn what DOD finds out once they have a chance to secure the site, recover the debris, and get it back and have the forensics done. This may end up being some type of weather balloon or scientific experiment or climate research. Who knows? But I think we need to withhold some judgment first.
As Secretary of Defense under President Trump, did you have good fidelity on China's use of balloons for intelligence gathering?
Well, clearly not, because we didn't learn that they were using these balloons until after the Trump administration left. That's according to this administration. So I was surprised last week when this first was announced about the Chinese surveillance balloon that was hovering above Montana, and of course, eventually made its way to the East Coast. So it is pointed out, as announced by the head of Northern Command, General Van Herk, that we have gaps in our air defense picture, and those need to be closed. And I hopefully they've already taken action to do so. Maybe today's demonstration of closing the gap and shooting down this unidentified object is evidence of that. But there's clearly work needs to be done in terms of addressing the aerospace picture that we see.
As you know, our government agencies are mostly focused on the skies and Chinese satellites. These balloons are relatively low tech. Is it kind of a workaround?
Yeah, it is. And I assume they offer different capabilities. And we'll learn more once they have a chance to go through the wreckage that was pulled out of the Atlantic Ocean the past few days. But the other thing they have is they have persistence. So they can sit up there at 60, 65,000 feet with some degree of maneuverability and propulsion and hover over a site in a way that an overhead satellite in space cannot do.
If this turns out to be confirmed that this aerial object is part of a Chinese program, would it be an escalation?
Yes. It caused me a lot of concern if that is indeed what happened. It would be very, very troubling. It begs the question, what is going on in Beijing? Are they purposefully doing this, committing these brazen acts to test us, provoke us? Or is there some disconnect between the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, and their political leadership in the Chinese Communist Party? That's what concerns me most here, is what's going on in Beijing, if this is indeed another Chinese balloon.
Big picture, there was a tweet from Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska, and he said we need to reestablish deterrence with regard to the Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party. Is the White House doing enough?
Well, I don't think they did enough on the front end. I mean, clearly they did the right thing by shooting it down eventually as it entered the Atlantic Ocean. But we should have shot this spy balloon down as soon as it entered United States airspace in the Aleutians, and certainly over Alaska. And I think that, said something to the Chinese about either our ability to technically detect the system or the political will we have to shoot it down. And I think that's what Congress needs to discover in the coming days as they hold hearings, is to find out, what did we know? When did we know it? What was recommended? And why was the decision made to not shoot the balloon down until after it traversed the United States? All these are things that I'm sure the Chinese are asking as well.
Mark Esper, thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
The war in Ukraine forced my family to flee. My sister, mother, and grandmother left their entire